All right, so today I'm going to be painting an 11 by 22 inch panorama. It's a scene with two trucks in it. One's like a big rig and then also a food truck and a guy walking over to the food truck. I've had this image for a long time, but I never liked the background in it. It was, you know, sort of shot out in an industrial area in Redwood City here. I kind of want to put a desert scene behind it, or a simplified scene. So I'm going to do that, but this process, I wanted to make a video that shared the process from beginning to end on a more complicated subject, you know, and obviously these trucks, there's more drawing involved. So I thought this would be a good one to, you know, kind of share the whole process. So I'm going to break it down into several videos because it would just be pretty long. And so the first video, today's video, is just going to be my process of sketching out, you know, sketching out the trucks in burnt sienna. Okay, so I started experimenting with by toning with a little bit of burnt sienna and yellow ochre, but I think I'm just going to go with a pure burnt sienna tone here. I do like, you know, that when there are little pops of the warm color that come through in a landscape, actually in any painting really. I mean, it could be a figure painting too. So, but I want to make sure that it's good and dry, because there's a thin layer, even when you dry it off like this, there's a thin layer of mineral spirits on the panel, and it can kind of overly thin your paint, because when you apply paint to the panel, it further thins it because of the layer of mineral spirits. I'm just going to kind of almost rub it down till it's dry. And even though that looks like a very light tint or tone, to be more precise, that will really, if there are any areas that are unpainted, it'll really pop. You'd be surprised at how saturated that will appear in the finished painting if there are any little areas that show through. All right, that's pretty good. Now, the drawing in this is fairly, I want to say it's fairly complicated. I mean, not really, but the first thing I'm going to do is kind of mark out where the bottom of the truck is. I'm going to mark out like bottom, top, you know, it's over here, kind of the, and you know, just where the big shapes are. I want to say this is about like here, and then I can get more specific later. There's a gap. Let's go here, and then the space between the two. And I'm not going to use the background that's in this particular photograph. Now, it looks like the shadow under the truck is at about the third. Yeah. So that's about the third line. And then there's this section. Actually, that needs to go, then there's another section here, and then this is about here. I think this might come up a little higher. And then it appears that the tailgate is somewhere in the middle of the composition, and it's a slight angle. Is that about right? Pretty good. Okay. And the relationship between this side and this, I think it needs to come over a little bit more. I'm looking at this shape right here. And I think this is a little bit too far over. All right, so the drawing on this is going to take a little bit of, obviously takes a little bit of focus to try to make sure that I've got everything in the right position. And I don't want to use I don't want to use a straight edge, and I don't want to use, I want to just do this freehand. I don't want to like grid it out or anything like that. All right, and I'm just focusing on shapes here, as usual, and not getting too. Oh, that goes over. Where does that go over to? It goes over about there. That's right. Yeah, so I'm not getting too, I'm not getting into detail. I'm just trying to, just sort of establish where these shapes are on the panel. And then I'm not going to progress until I get them where I want them. And I'm going to roll back periodically here to take a look at what I've got. This needs to come up a bit. And I'm not trying to get necessarily exact, but I want it to have a the feeling that I'm looking for, if that makes sense. And I'm just comparing shapes, and also too, the sketch part for me is always, there's also the process of getting familiar with the subject as well. That's another part of it for me, is that I'm just carefully looking, and I'm probably getting a little too involved in detail here, a little bit too early, because I want to make sure that I'm not getting too involved in detail before I've got everything where I want it to be. And I'm looking at relationships, like where does that front fender come out? It comes out, if I hold it up, it's about on this line right here. So that's all I'm looking for relationships here between the different shapes. this angle here is just definitely more dramatic. I don't want to, there's a tendency sometimes to make things, like everything horizontal, but there's a lot of angles going on here, and I want to make sure that I don't, I want to make sure that I maintain the angles. And I feel like that's pretty good. I think this needs to go up a little bit. I think this truck can come over a little bit more too. And now we've got some, and now also now that this is sort of in place, I can start using references. Like I could start using, I know that the top of this food truck should be up about here. I'm just comparing it to, this here. And this space is a little bit too small. Should be more like this. The windows of the food truck are about here. Bottom of the food truck kind of lines up with the top of this shadow. I can fine tune all these, these shapes. I'm just trying to get things in more or less the right place. It looks like the truck is sort of split in half. Let's see what the measurements are there. I'm just measuring with my, this is a little bit smaller. Oh, this is way too high. I know some of you like to yell at the screen and tell me the things I'm missing. It's a lot easier to see those things when you're observing, because I'm focusing on different things. It's like, if I miss them when the painting is finished, then you can yell. I find myself yelling at YouTube painters too, but I'm usually telling them to stop. Like I feel like that maybe they've gone too far. But again, it's everybody's looking for their own, everybody's got their own aesthetic ideas about what they want their painting to be. So, and I realize that when I'm painting, or when I'm watching a video, I'm, using my taste, like what I would want to do. And, I realize that everybody's got a different sense of, like their taste is different. So what I like is not necessarily what the artist is after. If that makes sense. The geometry on these things can be really tough. But just like the painting process, I like to kind of sculpt it out and find it, you know what I'm saying? I'm just sort of having fun with the process of exploring the shapes, and I'm always looking at the shapes, like what does this shape look like, and then how does it relate to this, and then is there a way I can simplify the shape of the very top of the truck, things like that. I'm always trying to do that. And then this here, there's this little canopy that comes out, and then I'm looking for like, how does this line relate to the top of the picture, things like that, to try to establish. Or this line here, I've got very horizontal, but if I look in the picture, it's actually in the photo reference, it's actually going up at an angle. Like I said, this one is pretty straight up and down, and that should be more of an angle. And these little things make a difference. They make a huge difference in the end. I like the drawing to be accurate, and then the paint application to be very loose. It's kind of the balance of those two is what I find really interesting. Oh, this is kind of straighter than I thought. I just double checked it. It is straight. Again, part of the drawing process is familiarizing yourself with the subject. All right, and I'm just gonna place the figure here, and I'm not gonna get. I'm not doing any kind of detail at all. What I will do is, because I'm going to be using a large brush, I'm going to come in and sculpt out this figure. So the lines are going to be kind of too, you know, everything with the smaller thing, shapes like this is going to be, the shapes are going to be wrong. But the placement of the figure is what I'm after. And then afterwards I can come in with a larger brush and sculpt out the shape of the figure. That's what I'm going to do using other paint. And then I can become more specific without using a tiny brush to paint, you know, the figure. And I may have to end up going back and forth in order to get the shape, you know, the way I like it, or to get an accurate shape. So here is the sketch. And I don't stop until I feel like, you know, the placement of this, the subject or subjects in this case are in the right place. And also I want them to have a sort of feel that I like. I really do like the feeling of this truck. I've already got an idea of how I'm going to define things using bits of dark. This truck is kind of more difficult in a way, and I want to make sure the geometry is correct. There's still a bit of sorting out to do, but I think it's close enough to move on. The figure I moved, because in the photograph they were like right dead center between the two of these. Moved the figure over a little bit. The figure is also too big, but like I said, I'm going to come back and carve out this figure with the surrounding paint. So that is step one right there, getting the sketch completed. And then as far as the horizon goes, that I'm going to use another photograph for that, and so that will be in the next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As usual, these videos are made possible by the support I get on Patreon. I have additional videos on Patreon. I really enjoy interacting with my Patreon patrons. I have a lot of spontaneous videos on there. Some are short, some are long. It's just whenever I have a thought in the studio about the creative process, or maybe struggles that I'm going through, I can just quickly pick up a camera and post those on Patreon. And like I said, it's what supports me to make these videos. So if you're interested in supporting, or you want to check out those videos, there's a link to Patreon down below. And other than that, stay creative, guys. See you in the next video.